My name is Landon Warmund with Reliant Financial Services. I'm a certified financial planner and a certified student loan professional. So most of the individuals that we work with are either school district employees or at a nonprofit company inside pretty much the state of Missouri. So that is really what we specialize, or those are kind of the people that we specialize in helping. So in terms of kind of what we're talking about today, we're going to be talking about public service loan forgiveness and how to take advantage of the temporary program changes. So in the past, this program has been just completely riddled with errors, and it's never been easy to understand. And so that's really why I started doing student loan planning as a service, was because there were so many issues with this program and so many individuals needed help navigating this. So really excited to talk about this topic today, just because it is kind of top of mind, especially with all of the talk about forgiveness under the Biden administration. And so this was the first big change that we've seen. So with that, I can just go ahead and start getting started with it. And so topics for today, the first thing that we're going to talk about is the current forgiveness options and rules. And so while I do have a lot on public service loan forgiveness, I temporarily touch on just two other forgiveness programs, mostly structured around teachers. But I wanted to throw those in there just to show that there is other opportunities for other subsets of people. And then we're going to talk about the temporary expansion of public service loan forgiveness. So this is really the program that's getting all the headlines. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about other additional planning opportunities around the public service loan forgiveness program. And then also specific opportunities around being in COVID right now, with most people's loans being in COVID forbearance. So kind of starting off, current forgiveness programs and rules. So the first one, now this is mostly going to be for teachers that are trying to continue their education. This would be a teach grant opportunity. So with this one, this is probably the one I know the least about, because we don't have a lot of employees pursuing this program, but there is an opportunity here that I think all district employees should pursue. Most of the time they have to reach out to the financial aid department at the university because it's on a program by program basis. So I wish it was easy and they said across the board, these are going to be your teach grant eligible programs. Unfortunately, that's not the case. So at each university, it might be slightly different on which ones are going to be a teach grant eligible program. And then typically there's a forgiveness after 4 years. And so normally what you will do is you'll sign an agreement saying that you were going to work at a low income school for 4 years. And at the end of that, you are going to get some amount of your loans forgiven. And it has to be a high needs field as well. The other option for teachers is teacher loan forgiveness. Now, this is one that a lot of people go after if they're within education, just because it's quick and it's easy. That doesn't always mean it's the best option for educators trying to get their loans forgiven. So kind of the specifics about this program, you must be a full-time highly qualified teacher. And the big thing is that you have to teach consecutively for 5 years at a low-income school. Now, I see a lot of educators trying to pursue this program, and maybe they have an employment break because maybe they had a child and they took some time off when they had that child, and that breaks up their employment, which removes their eligibility for those 5 consecutive years. So I always try to stress that it has to be 5 consecutive years. Forgiveness amounts can be either $5,000 or $17,500, depending on which position and which subject you're teaching. And some will already be qualified for this forgiveness program, and they don't actually know it. So I remember walking into some schools to meet with educators, and after asking them a few questions, it was as simple as giving them a form and having them submit this application for forgiveness. And there's no better feeling than having them come back and say, hey, I just got $17,500 of my loans forgiven. So these forgiveness programs are out there. You just have to start exploring them to figure out which one's best for you. Now, while this one might be the easier option for a lot of educators, it might not be the best option. So if you qualify for public service loan forgiveness and teacher loan forgiveness, typically public service loan forgiveness is going to be for those individuals with a higher student loan balance, just because you can get a larger amount forgiven than the limits set by teacher loan forgiveness. And the big thing is that if you do teacher loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness was a better option, you could potentially wipe out about 5 years worth of payments. So that's why it's extremely important to make sure that you're getting on the right plan from the start. Another thing is you can't have had a balance on student loans before October 1st of 1998. And you had to have had the balance that you're trying to get forgiveness on before your 5 years of qualified teaching. So what that kind of means is, let's say you're 3 years into teaching at a low-income school, you get student loans. Well, you're not just going to be able to do 2 more years. You have to have 5 consecutive years while having those loans in place. So that's teacher specific. And before I get on to public service loan forgiveness, there is one program that I did not include in these slides, and that is a long-term forgiveness plan. So a long-term forgiveness plan is typically for those individuals where their student loan balance is about 2 times their income. So let's say you have $50,000 in income. We would want you to at least have $100,000 in student loans before we start looking into like a long-term forgiveness option. With long-term forgiveness, it's normally forgiveness after about 20 to 25 years worth of payments. And then any kind of balance that's left over gets completely forgiven. Now, with that being said, that is taxable forgiveness. So just be prepared that you are going to have some sort of tax bomb at the end of that long-term forgiveness period. And then with that, there is planning around saving up for that tax bomb that you should probably do as well. And with that long-term forgiveness option, this isn't just for public service employees or this subset of employees. It is a forgiveness program that all individuals can pursue regardless of their profession. The big thing is you have to make 20 to 25 years worth of payments. Now, with that not being included, I wanted to switch over to public service loan forgiveness, which is where we're going to spend most of our time at during this little session today. So public service loan forgiveness is the one that just recently got a really big overhaul with a lot of the rules. So what I'm going to start by doing is giving you an overview of the rules that are currently in place, and then we'll get into the temporary changes that just happened. So typically with public service loan forgiveness, you get forgiveness on your total balance after you make 120 qualified payments. So the big thing is, what is a qualified payment? A qualified payment is going to be a full and on-time payment while you have the correct type of employment. So a public service employment like working at a 501c3, government organization, a qualified nonprofit with the correct type of loans. So those loans are mostly direct loans. And then you have to be on the correct repayment plan. So that is considered a qualified payment. And so they don't really make that too easy to understand. So that's kind of what this expansion is kind of trying to help with, is make it easier to qualify for this loan forgiveness, at least on a temporary basis. Now, what public service loan forgiveness is and how it's different from that long-term forgiveness I spoke about, a lot of people have the misconception that public service loan forgiveness is taxable, and it's actually not taxable. So let's say a public service employee has $150,000 in student loans. They make their 120 qualified payments and they have, let's say 100,000 left at the end of that period. They can get that balance completely wiped clean, and they don't have to worry about any kinds of taxes on that. So I see so many posts and misinformation spread around that says, oh, no, why would you want to do that? You're going to get a big tax bomb at the end of this period. That's not the case with public service loan forgiveness. And so, like I said, must have the correct type of loans, which we'll go into the exact loans here in a second. You must be on the correct repayment plan. You must have qualified employment. And the way they define qualified employment for public service loan forgiveness is that you have to at least meet your employer's definition of full-time or work 30 hours. So let's say your employer's definition is 25 hours. They would want you to at least hit the 30 hours. They want you to do whichever is greater. So kind of moving on to what kinds of loans are going to be eligible for public service loan forgiveness under the current rules. Really, the only ones that are going to be eligible are direct loans. So these are mostly newer style loans, which kind of left a lot of borrowers disadvantaged. That if you're older, you've been paying down your loans, you might have had what's called FFEL loans, so Federal Family Education Loans. These were mostly issued to older student loan borrowers. And these were the individuals that were most disadvantaged by the public service loan forgiveness system because they weren't providing enough information on what types of loans that you needed to have for this forgiveness program. So while you could consolidate your federal family education loans into a direct loan, a lot of people didn't know about that and could have potentially missed out on several years worth of payments that they could have made towards public service loan forgiveness, but they just don't count because they didn't know. Parent Plus loans don't qualify for public service loan forgiveness, at least in their current form. Private loans, well, those are never going to qualify just because those are not federal loans. Perkins loans don't also qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So really the only loans that are going to qualify are those direct loans. So kind of moving on to eligible repayment plans for public service loan forgiveness. Really, there's kind of two different categories. So there's just flat out standard repayment plan, which is a flat payment that you're going to make on a monthly basis for a full 10 years. And then you're getting into your income-driven repayment plans, which include income contingent repayment, income-based repayment, pay as you earn, revised pay as you earn. And depending on when you took your loans out or your tax filing status or what kind of loans you have, might dictate which of those income-driven repayment plans you might fall under. Most of the time, we don't recommend that individuals are on the standard repayment plan if they're going to be pursuing public service loan forgiveness, because like I said earlier, if your goal is to make 120 qualified payments to get your loans forgiven, and the standard repayment plan is based on 10 years worth of payments, well, it's going to be a wash at the end. So we want you to switch to a payment plan that might lower your student loan payment to allow some sort of balance at the end of that. So ineligible repayment plans are going to include the graduated repayment and extended repayment. So along with those borrowers that had those FFEL loans, a lot of them were doing these graduated repayment plans and extended repayment plans, thinking that they just had to be on a repayment plan and make them for 10 years and they'd get their balance forgiven. So they had kind of the realization that these two payment plans don't qualify. So like I said, with those FFEL loans, individuals could have been making payments for several years and they thought that would qualify, and it turns out it didn't. So under the current rules, those were the two ineligible repayment plans. Now transitioning into the temporary expansion of public service loan forgiveness. This is pretty much the biggest expansion of this program that we've seen since its inception back in 2007. So that's why it is really exciting to be able to talk about this stuff, because I've already had Zoom sessions and appointments with different public service employees the last 2 to 3 weeks, where they're just going to be able to get their loans forgiven immediately by sending in their applications. And these are individuals that have previously thought they weren't going to have any opportunity at forgiveness. So big emphasis on temporary. It is a temporary expansion. Now, while it could be signed into law, or legislation could get passed where it makes it permanent, as of now it's temporary. And so most of the time you're going to need to take action if you want to benefit from this expansion. And this is going to highly impact older student loan borrowers. So those individuals that have potentially been on an ineligible repayment plan, have had those federal family education loans. So it's going to benefit them the most. And the big thing with this temporary expansion is that any payment, any prior payment can qualify for forgiveness regardless of your repayment plan or your type of loan, even if it wasn't a full payment. And these are payments all the way back since October 1st of 2007. And an estimated 550,000 student loan borrowers are going to be impacted by this, all in public service. So when I say this is a huge expansion, I really mean it. This is like the biggest one we've seen. And so now what I do is I break it down into two types of student loan borrowers that might be trying to pursue public service loan forgiveness, and what they might need to do with their student loans to be able to get them to take advantage of this temporary expansion. So this is going to be for the borrowers with those federal family education loans. So maybe you are a borrower that still has FFEL loans and just kind of thought you were out of hope or out of opportunities and you couldn't get this public service loan forgiveness. So if you want to receive benefits under this temporary forgiveness program, you absolutely have to take action before October 31st of 2022. The reason why this program is temporary is because it was actually passed through under the HEROES Act, which is a temporary relief program that was brought around in, I believe, about 2007 or 2008 for when there's times of distress to kind of help people out. So it is a temporary program, and they were able to do it because of COVID. So if you have these loans, you have to take action before that date. And the big thing is you have to consolidate these FFEL loans into direct loans. Because let's say October 31st, 2022 happens, or we get to that date, and you don't consolidate, well, you still have ineligible loans. So this temporary forgiveness program is allowing you to get your loans to direct loans And then they're going to say, now what we want you to do is to certify all of your public service employment through the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Help Tool. And so what this is going to allow you to do is all of those previous payments that you've made on those FFEL loans, they're going to give you credit for those as long as you've had public service employment. So kind of explaining how this is going to greatly benefit those older student loan borrowers. So let's say you have been making payments on these FFEL loans since 2007, and you decide, well, I'm just going to have to pay it down. I'm not going to benefit from forgiveness. Well, if you've made 120 qualified payments, you're going to be able to consolidate these loans, send in an employment certification form, and get that balance forgiven without having to make any additional payments. So moving on to the other type of student loan borrower that might want to receive temporary benefit from this program. So these are going to be the borrowers that have direct loans. So if you are a borrower with direct loans, and let's say you made payments under like the extended repayment plan or graduated repayment plan, so those ones that don't qualify for forgiveness credits, what you'll want to do is you want to make sure that you send in an employment certification form for all of that public service employment. Now, if you've already sent in an employment certification form before, they're going to already go through the process of automatically just checking to see if you have any other forgiveness credits, and they will automatically apply that to your loans. But if you've never sent in an employment certification form, you definitely need to send one of these in to kind of start that review process. And one thing that I tell people is, if you aren't sure that you've certified, this employment or that employment, just certify it all, because this is a temporary opportunity, and we would hate for you to have, 1 or 2 years worth of employment that you thought you certified, but you actually didn't. So we want you to just certify all of your employment before that October 31st, 2022 deadline. And so those were, that was the big thing about the temporary forgiveness. And now, of course, we're going to go into additional planning opportunities. So maybe you are a borrower that has 5, 6, 7, 8 years worth of forgiveness credits, but you still want to take your time that you have left to pursue public service loan forgiveness and further maximize that forgiveness. So there are some additional planning opportunities that I want to talk to you about for that time that you have left. So the first one is taxes and student loans. A lot of people don't understand this, but when you are pursuing public service loan forgiveness, your taxes, retirement, and insurance benefits will all tie in to the amount of forgiveness that you might be able to receive. And that's a lot of opportunity that's out there that most borrowers are probably missing out on. And so chances are, if you're married, you probably have a good potential opportunity to lower your student loan payment with a little tax planning. I always recommend that you speak with a licensed tax professional before implementing any kinds of tax strategies with your student loans. Just because, let's say you do a tax filing status change, that can greatly, affect the rest of your finances. That could leave you with a $5,000 or $6,000 tax bill that you weren't expecting if you're not understanding how this program works. It can affect your retirement contributions, tax deductions, tax credits. So there's a lot that goes into this. So you have to be speaking with those professionals that understand student loans and taxes, and just taxes by themselves before implementing these kind of things. Talking about retirement planning, typically those borrowers that are pursuing loan forgiveness under this plan, they're going to be able to receive about 10 to 15% in savings on their student loan payments by contributing to retirement plans. With that, normally with those income-driven repayment plans, you get a 10 to 15% savings by reducing your income. So contributing to pre-tax retirement plans is going to be extremely beneficial under a loan forgiveness program like public service loan forgiveness. If you're able to coordinate benefits with your spouse, that can also lead to additional planning opportunities. And then lastly, sometimes with this retirement planning, we will pair this up with a little tax planning, because there is some really cool things that you can do when you start coordinating all of your different areas of your finances for your student loans. And then with insurance benefits, so your pre-tax benefits are going to have an effect on your student loan payment. So whenever you do pre-tax benefits, such as an HSA, FSA, health, dental, vision, all these pre-tax ones, that's going to further reduce your student loan payment. So The way I explain this to people is, let's say your payment is based on 10% of your discretionary income. If you contribute $100 per month into a retirement plan, an HSA, an FSA, well, that's a $10 per month that you don't have to make on your student loan payments. So there is some serious savings that can go along with that. And then another thing is coordination of benefits between you and your spouse is also going to yield you some additional savings. Now, kind of moving on to COVID-specific opportunities, and we've been seeing a lot of people miss out on some of these opportunities. So it's definitely important that if you think you have done one of these incorrectly, that you look into this further. So with COVID specific opportunities, the big thing is most student loans right now that are federal are going to be in what's called COVID forbearance. So the big thing is that the federal government came out and said that any non-payments under COVID forbearance are going to count as credit towards forgiveness. So they put everybody's student loan payments in a freeze, and they aren't accruing interest, and no payments are due. And so what they're saying is, while you keep it in that status, you're going to be accruing forgiveness credits as well. So for those individuals that might have been making payments on their student loans during COVID forbearance and have been pursuing public service loan forgiveness, you're going to probably want to try to get that money back. And there is ways and opportunities that you can do to get that money back. So for example, I had a student loan borrower that was pursuing public service loan forgiveness, and they made about $7,000 worth of payments during public service or during COVID forbearance. We were able to call and request a refund to get all of those payments back. Because if you're going to get loan forgiveness on all of your loans, well, we don't want you making any additional payments that you don't have to. Another cool thing is loans that are in default right now, you have the opportunity to have non-payments count towards credits towards rehabilitation. So typically there's a process to get your loans out of default, and it's normally not the easiest process. And it can be kind of costly whenever you're trying to pursue this. This is a huge opportunity where you don't have to make payments and get your loans out of default. And then just know that payments are set to start again in February of 2022. So I guess officially COVID forbearance ends at the end of January, payments due in February. So just know that, probably we're not going to see any extensions of COVID forbearance. Payments will start back up, and I don't see that changing too much. And so just for those borrowers that might be trying to pursue public service loan forgiveness, here's a few things that you can do to just kind of check up on your student loans. So one, have you ever certified your employment? If you've never certified your employment, or if you haven't certified all of your employment, this is going to be one thing that you're going to want to do to take advantage of your temporary forgiveness opportunity. If you have FFEL loans, you definitely need to take action, because these are loans that will not qualify once this temporary expansion expires. And just know that, be prepared for when your payments start back up, and know what repayment plan you're going to be on for February 2022. Think about this. We have been on COVID forbearance since March of 2020. A lot of people have gotten really, really comfortable not making a $100, $200, $300, $400 payment during COVID forbearance, and that might not be in their finances right now. So be prepared to see that come out of, your budget if you have one, because it could catch some people by surprise. And lastly, so just in summary, you have temporary opportunities with this public service loan forgiveness expansion if you are in that public service employment. So it is going to be beneficial for you to look into this. So you are going to have additional opportunities for savings if you are not going to be immediately eligible for public service loan forgiveness through taxes, retirement, and insurance planning. So coordinating all three of these is going to yield a lot of benefit for a lot of student loan borrowers. And then COVID forbearance is coming to an end, so just be prepared to start back up in February of 2022. And then lastly, I know student loans can be very stressful for a lot of people, especially when you're dealing with tens, 20s, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. This is why I create comprehensive student loan plans for clients. So if anybody ever wants to speak more, you're more than welcome to use the QR code or the link to schedule an appointment to do a 30-minute Zoom session. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
Thanks, Landon. That was actually really interesting, and I learned a lot. So you mentioned at one point that if you are going to do anything with your taxes, that you talk to a tax professional. Is that something that you have expertise in, or is that someone we would need to go to an outside professional for?
So typically what we do is we coordinate with a CPA, another chamber member, to do that kind of tax planning, because I can't fill out tax returns. I know the recommendations that need to be made to get your student loans in the correct situation and your finances in the correct situation, but we can't go forward and implement the tax planning portion. But
Okay.
yes, we work with the CPA very closely to implement that portion of it.
Okay, good. So you have somebody who's familiar with what you're doing and can kind of speak to that. Perfect.
Yep.
That was the big question that I had.
Any other questions?
Can you speak more on the kind of the definition of low income schools for the teacher portion?
Yeah. So with the low income schools, they actually are going to have a national directory of low income schools for teacher loan forgiveness. So if you actually go to studentaid.gov and look under the teacher loan forgiveness section, so actually you could literally just search on Google teacher loan forgiveness, and it's going to be that first link at the top. They're going to have a low income directory where you can actually search it by state, by employer, and find that full list of low income schools. And I guess one thing with teacher loan forgiveness that I forgot to mention is, let's say that you started your employment off at a low income school, and then later down the road, they switched off that low income list. They've actually came out and provided clarification that if you were on there for that first year, we're going to honor it for the 5 consecutive years. So.